Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into the most uncomfortable corner of medieval history, the one the history textbooks politely close the curtains on. Welcome to the world of medieval lore, and yes, adult entertainment. Not Game of Thrones spicy, more like, how is that even legal? If you thought your HOA was strict about lawn gnomes, wait until you hear what the city council in 1350 thought about silk stockings and playing the lute after dark. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that white noise, and get as comfortable as possible. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered how people in the Middle Ages actually dealt with the world's oldest profession? What counted as adult entertainment when no one even had pants with elastic waistbands? Were there bouncers, secret codes, or just a very angry nun standing outside with a bell? Did anyone ever try to unionize the local brothel, or did you just get fined for lewdly displaying an ankle within city limits? Could you actually get arrested for flirting badly in the marketplace, or did that only happen to people named Geoffrey? Would you last 5 minutes in a medieval court, or would you be sentenced to a week of reflection in the public stocks for giggling during Sunday Mass? And just how did the authorities keep tabs on everyone's after-dark hobbies before CCTV? Did they just have a very dedicated network of nosy neighbors with nothing better to do? Well, congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1370. In the bustling heart of a medieval town. The streets are cobbled, the laws are strict, and you, my friend, are about to discover that there is nothing less sexy than medieval paperwork. Step 1, in any self-respecting medieval town, making a very long, extremely specific list of things you are definitely not allowed to do. Spoiler. Almost all of them involve some combination of dancing, singing, or showing your elbows. The local magistrate's scroll is basically a medieval BuzzFeed quiz. Except every answer is, you're fined. You step outside your thatched hovel, careful not to trip over a stray goose or whatever the neighbor's child has left in the mud today. And there it is, nailed to the town post, fluttering gently in the wind, the infamous list. Every town has one, a record of all the ways you, personally, are failing society. The first rule? No lascivious jigs within sight of the parish church. The second? No singing bawdy songs unless accompanied by lute and a chaperone. The rest? Well, let's just say by the time you finish reading, you're halfway convinced you should just stay indoors and never speak again. Of course, these rules aren't written on nice, clean paper. No, they're scrawled on a weathered bit of parchment, stained with last week's stew. In handwriting so terrible you wonder if the scribe was actually a literate chicken, but the message is clear. Fun is strictly regulated, and spontaneous joy is considered suspicious at best, criminal at worst. Ever wonder what prompted these laws? Every single line has a backstory, usually involving too much ale, someone's unfortunate attempt at interpretive dance, and a strong-willed widow with opinions about moral decay. The rule against flamboyant hosiery during market hours? Geoffrey, obviously. The no-performing puppet shows for coin after dusk. That was a Thursday incident no one talks about anymore, and it's not just about so-called adult entertainment, either. The list covers everything. No street games involving dead animals, no public displays of enthusiasm for foreign cheese, and no hats taller than a loaf of bread, except on saints' days. Somewhere in the scroll, you'll probably find no excessive laughter while churning butter. Because apparently, the world is only safe when butter is churned solemnly and with minimal eye contact. So who's in charge of making sure everyone toes the line? That honor falls to the town beadle, a man whose life peaked at the age of 14, who now spends his days patrolling the streets with a very serious expression and a bell that seems to ring only when you're having a good time. The beadle keeps a little notebook, well, a scrap of wood and some notches, and he knows everyone's name, favorite sin, and the exact number of times you've danced the forbidden goat polka since Lent. Get caught breaking a rule? Prepare to pay a fine. The fines are never reasonable either. There's a 3-penny penalty for uncovered elbows in a place of commerce. 5 pence for singing with inappropriate gusto. If you happen to sneeze and accidentally reveal an ankle, that'll cost you an entire week's worth of onions. Some people have started a fine jar at home just to save time, but the rules serve another purpose too. They're the town's favorite gossip starter. No one actually expects total obedience. Half the fun is seeing who gets caught and how creatively they can talk their way out of it. When someone's summoned to the magistrate, the whole village turns out for the spectacle, hoping for a new story to tell at supper. Did you hear about Marjorie? Fined for humming on a Thursday. Scandalous. Of course, if you're clever, you learn to break the rules quietly, or at least blame it on your cousin from the next village over. The magistrate himself usually can't keep a straight face. Rumor has it he once fined himself for excessive smirking during Lent. The real secret to surviving the official list is simple. Don't take it too seriously. Follow just enough rules to keep the beadle off your back. Always have a plausible excuse. It was a celebratory jig, not a lascivious one, your worship. And if all else fails, offer to repair the church roof. For reasons nobody fully understands, all sins can be washed away by spending a weekend hauling thatch. And above all, remember, no matter how long the list gets, someone will always find a brand new way to embarrass themselves by Whitsuntide. The magistrate's scroll may get longer, but the fines are forever. Welcome to medieval compliance, where the only thing stricter than the rules is the urge to break them. Think you know what was considered risque? Think again. In medieval law, adult entertainment could mean anything from singing bawdy songs to wearing your hat at a jaunty angle. If it sounded fun, someone was definitely ready to outlaw it. Let's set the scene. You're wandering down the main street of a bustling medieval town. Let's call it Guildford for accuracy. As you pass the local tavern, you hear raucous laughter, the unmistakable plunk of a badly tuned lute, and someone attempting what might be the earliest recorded karaoke, the Song of the Wanton Miller's Daughter, a real crowd pleaser, banned in 3 counties, and heavily frowned upon in a 4th. You peek in, and it looks tame by modern standards. No pole, no fog machine, not even a velvet curtain in sight. Just 2 burly men clapping off beat. Someone with 1 tooth trying to juggle bread rolls, and a red-cheeked woman who, scandalously, has let a strand of hair escape her wimple. But in the eyes of medieval law, you've just witnessed a den of vice so unspeakable it could be shut down by sunrise. Why? Because adult entertainment was basically anything that made someone in charge feel nervous, left out, or a little bit jealous. Sure, there were brothels and bathhouses, places everyone pretended not to know about but could find blindfolded on a foggy night. But the official list of what counted as lewd was a fever dream of local anxieties. Take music, for example. If a song had more than 2 verses, it was suspicious. Add a chorus about love, or, heaven forbid, an innuendo about stirring the pot, and you'd better hope your alibi is airtight. Dancing? Strictly regulated. The wrong kind of jig could earn you a stern talking to by the parish priest, and a one-way ticket to the stocks. Even whistling after dark was rumoured to invite evil spirits, or, more likely, keep your neighbours awake, which was pretty much the same thing. Fashion? Oh, it was dangerous territory. A woman's neckline 2 fingers too low, a man's hose just a little too brightly coloured, or anyone daring to add a feather to their cap, all instant scandal. Some towns even had professional fashion informers, whose entire job was to wander about, tutting at people's ankles and writing furious letters to the local bishop. In one particularly strict borough, records show a baker fined for wearing blue in a lusty manner. What does that even mean? No one knows, but the blue bread trend never caught on. And don't forget public storytelling. The medieval version of stand-up comedy was, in fact, sitting down and reciting mildly naughty tales, usually about a fox, a clever nun, and a bishop who ends up in a barrel. If your story made more than 3 people snort their ale, congratulations. You just committed a misdemeanor. Bonus points if you manage to sneak in a double entendre about cabbages. Actual brothels? They existed, sometimes right under the watchful nose of the town hall. Some were legal, provided they paid their taxes and avoided operating on Sundays or during Lent. Others simply paid extra cleanliness fees to the right officials, who miraculously found no sins occurring within, as long as everyone remembered to curtsy politely and serve weak beer to the constables. But for the average townsfolk, the biggest danger wasn't getting caught in an actual house of ill repute. It was being seen laughing too loud, singing the wrong chorus, or just enjoying yourself a little too much. In medieval society, pleasure itself was suspect. And pleasure that was public, well, that was practically a cry for help, or a sermon. So as you tiptoe back to your candlelit room, try not to look too cheerful. Keep your hat at a respectful angle. Hum only the first verse of any tune. And if anyone asks, you were absolutely not entertained tonight. Just morally improved. One stern rule at a time. Every medieval town had one. The mysterious, well-connected madam who somehow knew everything and everyone. She ran the show with an iron fist and a ledger book thicker than most Bibles. She also paid more in bribes than some lords paid in taxes. You've probably heard of the local blacksmith, the miller, the innkeeper, but the real power behind the scenes? That's the mistress of the house. And house here doesn't mean a quaint little cottage with roses around the door. We're talking about the establishment everyone pretends not to notice, even though it's somehow the best-lit building in the entire town and suspiciously busy right after payday. If you wander past the door, you might catch a glimpse of her, part hostess, part accountant, part amateur lawyer, and full-time crisis manager. She knows exactly which bishop's nephew likes to visit after Vespers, which city guard can be bought for the price of a pie, and who'll pay extra for a foot massage and complete confidentiality. Her real skill isn't just keeping the peace among rowdy customers, it's keeping her staff out of jail and her business out of the priest's next sermon. The mistress doesn't just manage her own people, she manages the entire neighborhood's mood. She's the unofficial HR for half the town. Did the baker's apprentice show up to work late and smelling of rosewater? She'll know why. Did the mayor's wife suddenly get very interested in charity work on Tuesday nights? She'll know what charity means too. Gossip flows to her and through her, filtered, refined, and weaponized with surgical precision. Her main tool of trade? Bribery. Forget bags of gold. Sometimes it's as simple as a jug of ale, a roasted goose, or an invitation to the back room during a slow night. There's an art to knowing whom to bribe and when. Too much, and you're on every watch list. Too little, and the town beadle accidentally raids your cellar for the 5th time this month. And don't even get her started on church holidays. Nothing like a sudden burst of piety to dry up business and double the price of silence. The ledger is her Bible. But it's not just for keeping track of money. It holds the secrets of the town. Debts owed, favors granted, and a running tally of who's a reliable client and who's a liability. Every page is a balancing act between risk and reward, between keeping the local lawman happy and not attracting the bishop's wrath. Most lords don't keep records this detailed, probably because they can't read, but also because their secrets aren't half as interesting. Hiring is a science of its own. The best workers are quick-witted, discreet, and able to disappear through the back alley faster than a ferret with a guilty conscience. Training includes everything from how to spot a church spy to how to hide a coin pouch in a soup pot. Uniforms are less about style, more about plausible deniability. Something you could wear in church, but with strategic lacing, just in case business calls. And in a world where the law changes every time a new lord gets bored, the mistress of the house has to be half fortune teller, If the wind shifts and the morality police are in town, she's already arranged for the premises to transform into a perfectly legal boarding house or herbal remedy shop. If you're ever in need of a quick alibi or a plausible cover story, this is the woman you want. Most people pretend she's invisible, but deep down, everyone knows. She's the reason half the marriages in town are still functioning, the secret behind every unexpected inheritance, and the only person who can talk the mayor out of another midnight crackdown. So next time you think of medieval power players, skip the lords and bishops. The real survivor, the one you want on your side, is the mistress with the iron gaze and the bottomless ledger. She's playing chess while everyone else is still losing at dice. Picture it. A rowdy building with a flickering lantern outside, and a bouncer who is definitely someone's uncle. Bathhouses sometimes doubled as brothels, and everyone pretended not to notice, especially on Thursdays. You're walking down a muddy street at twilight, cloak pulled tight against the chill, nose twitching at the scent of stale ale and 1,000 unwashed medieval secrets. There, sandwiched between the tanner's stinking hut and the bountiful Duck Tavern, you spot it, the infamous establishment with just a little too much laughter coming from inside and a lantern swaying in the breeze. The universal sign for something mildly illegal and highly interesting is happening here. You might pause for a second, purely out of curiosity, adjusting your hat in that I'm definitely just out for a walk sort of way. But you're not fooling anyone, not the gaggle of teenage boys loitering near the door, nor the bouncer, who, if rumors are true, is also the town's best pie-eating champion and part-time rat-catcher. As you edge closer, a couple stumbles out, faces flushed, desperately pretending to discuss scripture as they trip over the step. Inside, it's chaos, but a very organized chaos. Like a medieval dinner party hosted by people who've given up pretending to care about the local bishop's opinions. There's laughter, the splash of bath water, the thump of boots on wooden planks. Men, and the occasional adventurous noblewoman, drift from steamy bath to candlelit room, towels tucked so precariously that it's basically a test of faith. Of course, everyone knows what's really happening. The bathhouse is supposedly a place for hygiene, but let's be honest, nobody's here for the soap. Sure, you'll see the odd merchant pretending to scrub his elbows, but he's mostly here to soak in gossip and try not to make eye contact with his brother-in-law in the next tub. The workers, dressed in appropriate attire, meaning something between a bedsheet and a prayer for forgiveness, glide between rooms, distributing herbal water, strong ale, and occasionally unsolicited advice on local politics. The local authorities? They operate on the world's oldest system, selective blindness. Technically, the place is a licensed bathhouse, but the paperwork is as thin as the privacy curtains. On Thursdays, the town watch is mysteriously busy inspecting the mill, and anyone important enough to protest is usually inside, enjoying a discount on their weekly soak. Bathhouses doubling as brothels was one of the worst-kept secrets in town, and the art of pretending not to notice became a civic tradition. The parish priest would deliver a strongly worded sermon about temptations of the flesh every Sunday, then spend Monday mornings collecting donations from the mistress of the house, delivered discreetly in a basket of fresh rolls. Even the baker gets in on it, offering midnight loaves only to the staff and regulars. If you've ever seen a city run on winks and nods, you'll understand. Every so often, a new magistrate would arrive, eager to clean up the town. There would be a public raid, complete with clanging bells and a lot of shouting. The townsfolk would feign shock, the workers would vanish out the back, and the mayor would find himself awkwardly explaining why he was just there to inspect the plumbing. By Tuesday, the bathhouse would be open again, slightly cleaner and with a brand new lantern out front. For most, the goal was plausible deniability. Oh, that place? I hear they do an excellent foot scrub. Not that I'd know, of course. Reputation was everything. Nobody wanted to be known as a regular. But nobody wanted to lose their spot in the bath, either. Town gossip kept score, and secrets were traded over laundry lines, in church pews, and anywhere the bouncer couldn't hear. So, you keep walking, practicing the ancient medieval art of minding your own business. Maybe you catch a wink from the mistress herself, equal parts warning and invitation. In a town built on hypocrisy, everyone knows. The real cleanup happens after the bathhouse closes, when everyone goes back to pretending nothing ever happened. At least until next Thursday. You know how modern cities have zoning laws? In the Middle Ages, you could actually get a license for your brothel, provided you were willing to pay a hefty fee and never, ever host a party during Lent. Sin, but make it regulated. It's hard to picture, but medieval towns actually had paperwork for this. Somewhere, in a dusty back room of the town hall, the scribe sat at a rickety table, quill in hand, ready to legalize your questionable new business venture. All you had to do was cough up the right number of coins, fill in your name, real or otherwise, and solemnly promise that no one would sing Filthy Friar's Folly on a Sunday. Congratulations. You're now the proud owner of an official house of hospitality. The local lord loved nothing more than a steady stream of sin tax. Every brothel paid for the privilege of existing, and those fees added up, sometimes funding new church bells, cathedral spires, or even, ironically, the annual morality parade. The more business you did, the more you owed. Some towns had sliding scales. 3 shillings for the modest cottage, 5 for the house with a sign out front, and more than 4 feather beds. God forbid you added musical entertainment. That was extra. Of course, the paperwork was never simple. You had to keep a logbook, don't laugh, listing who worked there, who visited, and which days were busiest. Not because medieval authorities were health inspectors, far from it, but because if there was ever trouble, the town watch wanted to know exactly who to shake down for extra cash, or, if they were feeling pious, to drag in front of the bishop for a bonus confession. Medieval zoning was delightfully hypocritical. Brothels were often required to operate in designated areas, usually far from the market square but conveniently close to the city gates. Why? So when the bishop came to town, he could pretend he never saw them. That street? Oh, that's just the old soapmaker's alley. Very boring. Smells like lavender and poor choices. But the real reason was crowd control. Keep vice in one place, and it's easier to supervise, tax, and occasionally raid for dramatic effect. Ironically, these licensed houses were often safer than most other businesses. With a license, you were at least partially protected from random midnight purges and overzealous moralists. Sure, there was always the risk of some new lord showing up and deciding to clean house. But as long as your paperwork was in order and your bribes were well timed, you were less likely to be run out of town than, say, the guy who sold bad cheese. Regulation came with strings. Inspections, real or pretend, happened just often enough to give everyone a story for the next festival. If you failed to pay your fee or dared to operate without a license, punishment was swift. Hefty fines, public humiliation, and possibly a dramatic reading of your sins by the town crier. The licensed brothel became a weird symbol of civic order, proof that the town could manage temptation as long as it made money. Then there were the loopholes. Officially, you weren't supposed to serve anyone underage, host gambling, or keep the doors open during Lent, Easter, or after the third bell on Sundays. In reality, if you'd greased the right palm, anything could happen, as long as you had a convincing cover story and a spare bed for the local bailiff's niece. This system also created a flourishing black market. Unlicensed houses popped up constantly, offering discount rates and riskier fun. The licensed keepers hated them. How dare someone dodge taxes and steal clients? But the authorities mostly just saw another opportunity for bribes. So next time you're stuck in city zoning hell, remember, at least you don't need a bishop's blessing to open your business, or a signed confession to keep your doors open after midnight. In the medieval world, sin wasn't just tolerated. It was organized, stamped, taxed, and above all, never, ever allowed during Lent. That, apparently, was a step too far. Yes, even your local brothel was taxed. And just like every other business, there was always a mysterious, miscellaneous fee that made you wonder if the city accountant was just making things up as he went. Let's walk through a typical day as the unfortunate soul in charge of brothel bookkeeping. You wake up, stretch, and reach for your ledger because before the fun can start, there's math to do. Your first stop is the town hall, where you're greeted by a scribe with a permanent frown, a wax-stained robe, and a quill that looks like it was sharpened on a millstone. He presents you with a bill for the week. 6 shillings for the sin license, 2 for the lamp outside, and 1 for the maintenance of the town duck pond. The duck pond is, famously, nowhere near your establishment. But wait, there's more. The General Morality Fund fee, the maintenance of public virtue surcharge, the unexpected music at odd hours levy, and, just in case you thought you'd planned ahead, a rainy day inconvenience toll triggered by inclement weather and a city official who dislikes soggy streets. Every column in your ledger reads like the fever dream of a tax collector who once lost a dice game in your establishment and never quite recovered. Brothels were hardly the only targets. In the Middle Ages, everyone was taxed, but the houses of ill repute made especially tempting prey. They were cash businesses, bustling with patrons, and, let's be honest, no one ever stuck up for them in court. City officials figured, if you're already running a morally grey business, you won't argue too loudly about a little creative arithmetic. Some taxes were predictable, a flat operating fee, paid weekly, monthly, or, in lean times, whenever the local sheriff needed a new horse. But other charges were pure invention. If a bishop was feeling especially pious, or especially broke, there might be an extra confessional cleansing fee. During Lent, fines for being open at all could double, and on certain saints' days, you might even get a piety rebate, which was never actually paid out, but made everyone feel virtuous for pretending. Then there were tolls for every transaction, a cut for every bottle of wine sold, every guest room rented, every performance that went on a minute longer than was strictly necessary. Rumor had it some towns even charged by the candle, just to keep you honest. And because city governments thrived on plausible deniability, most receipts simply read, miscellaneous services rendered. What services, exactly? The less said, the better. If you tried to dodge a fee, the consequences were swift and humiliating. Auditors, disguised as monks, or occasionally over-enthusiastic poultry inspectors, would descend on your establishment, rummaging through ledgers, counting beds, and making loud, public notes about suspicious activity near the pantry. Nothing sends customers scurrying like a town official, loudly demanding to inspect your soap inventory. Of course, there were ways to get creative. Many brothel keepers developed a kind of tax dodger's sixth sense. Hide a few coins in the flour sack, invent a lost in the wash column, or claim that all business last Thursday was actually a prayer circle for wayward souls. If you knew which officials liked a discreet freebie or a slice of plum tart, you could keep the worst of the fees at bay. All the while, the real winners were the town coffers. Fines and taxes from brothels built more than one cathedral tower, funded festivals, and, ironically, paid for the statues of saints placed just outside the brothel district as a warning to the pious and a landmark for everyone else. So next time you grumble about a service charge on your bank statement, remember, in medieval times, everyone paid their dues, sometimes twice, sometimes in onions, and always with a knowing wink to the taxman. And the duck pond? Still not your responsibility. In a world without neon signs, how did people advertise forbidden fun? Easy. A certain colored ribbon, a basket in the window, or just an exceptionally large quantity of lavender. Medieval marketing was all about plausible deniability. You wander through the narrow, winding lanes of a medieval town, noticing how every house, at first glance, looks pretty much the same. Damp stones, crooked timbers, the faint smell of someone's dinner burning. But if you pay attention, and you're a local, or just very nosy, you start to pick up on a secret language of symbols, almost like a medieval version of Tinder, except the only thing swiping is a broom. Maybe you see a door with a green ribbon tied around the handle. To an outsider, it's just festive, a little touch of color in a grey world. But for those in the know, it's an invitation. Welcome, but only if you're here for the right kind of company. Sometimes it's a basket hanging from a window, filled with apples in the autumn or violets in the spring. The kind of fruit or flower tells you exactly what's on offer. From warm bath, no questions asked, to nights eat free. If there's a red cloth on the step after sundown, that's your cue to knock, quietly, and only if you've brought exact change. The real pros get creative. Some brothels sent out subtle signals with light, 3 candles in the window for regular business, 1 lantern swinging on a rope if there's a sudden need to look respectable. Surprise inspection by the bishop again. Everyone act normal. If you spot a house with more lavender than the local monastery's laundry, it's not just a sign they like pleasant scents. Lavender covered up the less pleasant ones, but it was also code for our bathhouse is more than it seems. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of mood lighting, but with a lot more pollen. This covert advertising wasn't just about attracting the right clients, it was also about keeping the wrong people out. The church and town watch weren't exactly Sherlock Holmes, but even they could spot a brothel if it had a sign that said, "Sin here, inquire within." Instead, everyone played the plausible deniability game. If someone complained, the owner could say, "Oh, the ribbons? For St. Crispin's Day. The apples? I'm very into produce. The lavender? Just a hobby, officer." The ability to deliver these excuses with a straight face was part of the job description. Of course, locals loved to gossip about the secret meanings, which quickly became not so secret. Children dared each other to steal the ribbons. Grandmothers swapped stories about which house used to hang a yellow scarf and what that meant in the year of the Great Goose Incident. The baker's wife, always first to spot a new window arrangement, kept an unofficial catalogue of local signals, ready to weaponize at the next church social. Travelers and strangers could easily miss the cues and walk right by, or, worse, knock on the wrong door and end up in a prayer meeting, which was the medieval equivalent of being rickrolled. But if you were looking for adventure, or just a hot bath and a sympathetic ear, learning the codes was part of becoming a local. Even authorities, on some level, appreciated the system. It kept vice organized, discreet, and mostly off the main streets, until someone forgot to hide the ribbons on holy days. And then there'd be a flurry of fines, wailing, and the annual "we really mean it this time" crackdown. The cycle would repeat, with everyone acting surprised that, once again, a basket of apples could mean so much more than a healthy snack. So, as you stroll home, the scent of lavender on the breeze and a dozen colored ribbons fluttering in the night, you realize medieval life wasn't just about survival. It was about communicating without ever saying a word, keeping your secrets safe, and, when in doubt, blaming the flowers. Meet the original Neighborhood Watch, except with more bells, more lists, and a slightly worrying interest in what everyone else is doing after sunset. They're less law enforcement and more professional killjoys. Picture this. You're just settling in for a quiet evening, maybe humming a suspiciously upbeat tune or daring to play dice by candlelight, when you hear the distant clang of a bell. That's not a call to prayer, friend. That's the town's morality patrol, out to make sure no one, anywhere, is enjoying themselves past curfew. Forget hardened criminals and daring bandits. The real terror of medieval nightfall is the sound of approaching self-righteousness in shoes 2 sizes too large. The members of the town watch are hand-picked for their 2 main qualities: an uncanny ability to frown for hours without blinking, and the world's sharpest ears for detecting fun. They wear big, itchy cloaks, carry staves that they bang loudly against doors, and keep a record of suspicious noises made between the hours of vespers and dawn. These noises include, but are not limited to, laughter, singing, loud chewing, and the dangerous sound of 2 people agreeing to meet again. Their main tool? The list. The list is legendary, constantly updated, and always slightly out of date. It names everyone suspected of improper merriment, lists addresses where unlicensed laughter has occurred, and includes detailed notes on who was seen carrying what kind of bread. Because you never know, sometimes it's a euphemism. If your name lands on the list, expect a knock on your door, a barrage of questions about your ankle coverage, and a warning about the dangers of carousing with left-handed millers. Don't bother hiding behind plausible deniability. These folks were trained by generations of nosy grandmothers. They'll question your neighbors, inspect your firewood pile for signs of secret midnight gatherings, and interrogate your pets for evidence of excessive happiness. Have a cat that purrs too loud? Good luck explaining that at the next town meeting. Patrols are a town spectacle. The watch moves in pairs or threes, stomping through muddy streets, their lanterns swinging like tiny judgmental lighthouses. On particularly slow nights, they invent work. Better check the North Alley for illicit ankle viewing. Or, let's see if that suspicious window candle is back. Some nights, they stop people just to ask if they're thinking about doing anything fun. If you look guilty, they write it down. And if you're caught, the punishments are never subtle. You might be given an official warning for untimely cheerfulness, or, worse, forced to attend a sermon on the dangers of mirth. Repeat offenders might find themselves in the stocks with a sign reading, "Giggled during the harvest festival." Nothing like a public shaming to guarantee you'll never tell a joke again. The real magic of the morality patrol, though, is how everyone, yes, everyone, works around them. Families invent elaborate alibis. Brothel keepers stage Bible readings at odd hours. Even the mayor's son slips the patrol a pie or 2 to keep his name off the list. The watch pretends not to see what they're bribed not to notice, and the rest of the town pretends to be much sadder than they actually are. Of course, some take it too seriously. The captain of the watch writes anonymous letters to the bishop, denouncing unholy joy in the bakery and pagan whistling in the fields. Meanwhile, everyone else just waits for them to finish their rounds and then resumes whatever they were doing, slightly quieter, with one ear cocked for bells. So next time you think your neighbors are nosy, spare a thought for the medieval town watch. They weren't just monitoring your property. They were policing your mood. And in a world where even a smile could earn you a spot on the list, sometimes it was safest to look bored, sound tired, and save the laughter for Thursdays, after the bells have stopped ringing. Get caught breaking the rules, and you might end up in the stocks, on display for all your neighbors and at least 3 chickens. Nothing like a good old-fashioned dose of public shame to cure you of your indecency. Imagine waking up to find your name posted on the town notice board, right between Lost Goat, Answers to Clive, and Turnip Sale. Today only. Maybe you danced a little too energetically at the Solstice Festival, or someone saw you wink at the baker's apprentice. It doesn't take much to land you in trouble. Before you know it, 2 very serious men in itchy wool cloaks are escorting you to the center of the village square, where the real action happens, not at the tavern, not at the market, but at the stocks and pillory. The stocks are the medieval version of a really embarrassing open mic night, except the only thing you're performing is regret. Picture yourself with your feet locked into a sturdy wooden frame, sitting awkwardly as every villager, from tiny children to old crones, passes by for a good stare. The pillory, meanwhile, offers an extra twist. Your head and hands are trapped, so you're stuck upright, unable to do anything but contemplate the questionable life choices that brought you here. It's neck pain, public scrutiny, and exposure therapy all in one. The townsfolk, naturally, love it. This is the medieval equivalent of reality TV, except with more mud. The local busybodies come prepared with questions. Was it really 2 verses of the Bawdy Shepherd's ballad? While children run circles around you and chickens peck at your shoes. Some people even bring snacks, because nothing pairs better with fresh gossip than yesterday's cheese. And if your reputation was ever in doubt, rest assured, now everyone knows exactly what you did, and a few things you probably didn't do but will spend the next month denying. Punishments aren't subtle. The length of your sentence depends on your crime, your social status, and how entertaining you look when flustered. A minor offense, say, an exposed ankle or singing off-key, might get you a few hours of sunburn and sideways glances. More serious misbehavior, like running an unlicensed bathhouse or insulting the town beadle's hat, could see you out there for days. If you're unlucky, someone will arrange to have your stocks positioned facing the latrine, just for that extra sensory experience. Then there's the public commentary. Medieval crowds don't just observe, they participate. Someone will absolutely remind you of every childhood mistake you ever made. The town crier might recite a dramatic reading of your worst moments, punctuated with moral advice. Let this be a lesson to all. Never juggle turnips after Vespers. The local priest will swing by, gently suggesting a little more penance and a little less merriment. You'll hear every nickname you ever hated, plus some new ones invented just for the occasion. Of course, physical comfort is out of the question. The stocks are built for maximum awkwardness. Forget cushions, you're sitting on splintered wood. If it rains, you get wet. If it's hot, you burn. If you sneeze, good luck wiping your nose. Sometimes, the baker's wife might take pity and toss you a crust of bread. Sometimes, the butcher's son will accidentally miss and hit you with a turnip. It's all part of the experience. But the real genius of medieval punishments is this. They're less about legal deterrence and more about reminding everyone that embarrassment is the strongest law of all. After a turn in the stocks, even the boldest troublemaker thinks twice before whistling after dark or buying suspiciously colourful hose. And so, when your sentence is up and the beadle unlocks you with a self-satisfied sigh, you limp away, red-faced and covered in crumbs, vowing to be the dullest, least scandalous citizen in town, at least until next Thursday. Because in the Middle Ages, the stocks are always waiting, and so are the chickens. When in doubt, call in the local nuns. Their main weapons? Disapproving glances, buckets of holy water, and the ability to write a scathing letter to your mother. In the grand tapestry of medieval law enforcement, the local nuns are the thread no one dares pull. Forget armoured knights and stern-faced magistrates, the sisters of St. Mildred's are the real authority on the mean cobblestone streets. They drift in like a cold breeze, veils fluttering, rosaries clacking, and an aura of stern disappointment you can feel from 30 paces. You could be minding your own business, humming a little too enthusiastically outside the bakery, when suddenly Sister Agnes appears, wielding a look that can curdle milk. Their patrols are legendary, especially during times of heightened moral danger, which, in medieval Europe, is basically all the time. Have a festival? Nuns. Summer solstice? Nuns. Random Tuesday with above-average laughter levels? That's right, nuns. They glide through town, eyes narrowed for evidence of lewd behavior, or worse, mixed dancing. Their mission? Save souls and ruin plans. The weapons of choice are psychological, not physical. The disapproving glance is their specialty. A single raised eyebrow from Sister Beatrice can send a grown man running for confession. The more advanced technique is the silent hover, perfected by nuns over centuries. Just stand a little too close for a little too long, arms folded, lips pursed, until the guilty party cracks and admits they were, in fact, thinking about removing their hat in public. But they don't stop at intimidation. The holy water bucket is both deterrent and punishment. Deployed at weddings, feasts, or anywhere someone might be about to do something regrettable. Medieval chronicles are filled with stories of nuns launching preemptive strikes on innocent gatherings, leaving entire crowds soggy and spiritually refreshed. The only thing wetter than the congregation is the shame hanging in the air. Nuns also possess a superpower feared by all: the letter to your mother. If you're caught anywhere near a brothel, bathhouse, or suspiciously fun-looking gathering, your family will hear about it by dawn. The sisters maintain a network of correspondence, spreading news of misbehavior faster than the plague. Medieval parents, otherwise preoccupied with surviving winter and tax season, will always find time to respond to a nun's complaint. The disappointment at home is almost as bad as public punishment, and if you're a repeat offender, the nuns might petition the priest to deliver an extra-long sermon on Sunday, pointedly mentioning certain temptations of the flesh while staring directly at you the entire time. Even the town's worst troublemakers go pale at the thought. Despite their severity, the nun patrols are a fixture of medieval community life. Their presence keeps the more creative parties in check. It's not carnal knowledge, sister. It's an advanced lesson in folk dancing. They hand out pamphlets, scrawled notes, about chastity, charity, and the benefits of cold baths. They keep careful notes in a secret ledger, which is rumored to include everything from flirtatious cheesemonger to possible winking incident behind the mill. Surprisingly, the nuns are not universally feared. Some villagers consider them a necessary part of the social ecosystem, a counterbalance to the excesses of festivals and a safeguard against the more dangerous forms of gossip. Children grow up learning to respect the sisters, if only because they hand out sweets at Christmas and tales of fiery damnation the rest of the year. So, as you tiptoe past the convent, heart pounding and hands very much to yourself, you reflect on the delicate balance of medieval fun. For every sin, a nun; for every party, a prayer. The church may not have controlled every aspect of medieval nightlife, but with the local nuns on patrol, you always knew someone was watching, judging, and, if necessary, writing a letter to your mother. Repent, refresh, repeat. The church had a simple plan: sin on Saturday, confess on Sunday, and hope your priest didn't recognize you from last night. Medieval forgiveness was a lot like modern customer service: slow, unsatisfying, and always with a lecture. You shuffle into the cool stone church, blinking in the morning sun, trying to remember if you still smell like bathhouse lavender or just cheap ale. Confession is supposed to be anonymous, but let's face it. In a village this size, the priest knows every voice, every cough, and every last name. When you kneel behind the little wooden screen, you're not fooling anyone, especially not Father Matthew, who saw you helping the baker's daughter home after curfew. The process is, in theory, straightforward. You admit what you did, hopefully with minimal detail. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been not long enough since my last confession. You mumble something about excessive laughter, maybe a bit of dice rolling, possibly some ankle viewing in the moonlight. Father Matthew listens, sighs heavily, and then launches into a lecture about the temptations of the flesh and the importance of modesty, staring pointedly through the screen as if he can see you fidgeting. Sometimes you get away with just a few Hail Marys and a gentle warning. But if your sins are particularly spicy, or the priest is having a bad day, it might be a lot more. Maybe a week of fasting, a donation to the poor box, or worst of all, volunteering to repair the church roof. That's penance medieval style. Physical, public, and very, very itchy. But here's the twist. Confession isn't just about your soul. It's also the medieval gossip network's central hub. Everyone is confessing, Everyone is worried someone else confessed about them, and half the village is convinced that Father Matthew secretly keeps a list. No one wants to be the one who gets the public penance treatment, kneeling at the church door in sackcloth while the rest of the congregation files past, pretending not to stare but definitely staring. It's the original walk of shame, with fewer high heels and more splinters. There are loopholes, of course. You can try to be vague. I may have participated in a group activity that involved enthusiasm and perhaps a lute, but the priests have heard it all, and some even keep a mental tally of who's confessed to which sin the most times. Too many repeat offences, and suddenly your penance comes with extra chores. Scrubbing the floor, ringing the bell at sunrise, or, if you're really unlucky, helping Sister Agnes reorganize her pamphlets on chastity. For those who really push the boundaries, there's always the threat of the secular authorities. Confess early and sincerely, and you're less likely to end up in the stocks. Try to keep your Saturday night secrets too well hidden, and you might wake up to the town beadle at your door, ready to march you off for further reflection in the local lockup. Penance or prison isn't just a catchy phrase, it's an actual choice, and neither option is particularly appealing if you value comfort or dignity. Meanwhile, the cycle continues. Every Saturday brings another round of temptation, festivals, harvest dances, or just the irresistible call of the slightly crooked tavern on the edge of town. Every Sunday brings more anxious faces in the confession line, everyone rehearsing their excuses and hoping Father Matthew has heard worse. Spoiler: he has. By Monday, most people have sworn to behave. By Wednesday, they're planning next weekend's mischief. And so it goes. Sin, confess, repent, repeat. Medieval forgiveness. Less about spiritual cleansing, more about damage control, reputation management, and praying your mother never hears the details. So the next time you roll your eyes at customer service, remember, at least you don't have to confess your browser history to the guy who saw you at the bake sale. In the Middle Ages, everyone had something to confess. The real miracle was surviving the lecture. Spoiler, it's almost never the guy. Women in the trade faced harsher punishments, more public shaming, and endless lectures about the dangers of dancing with strangers. Men, meanwhile, mostly got advice to try not to get caught next time. Picture this. You're a young woman in medieval town, working at the bathhouse or perhaps just daring to wear your hair uncovered on a windy Tuesday. A little too much laughter at the festival? A single glance over your shoulder at the wrong moment? Suddenly, you're the main character in a morality play you never auditioned for. The punishment? Not just the stocks, but the special, extra judgy kind, right in front of the church, where every neighbor, cousin, and distant aunt can stroll by and shake their heads with the weight of 1,000 sighs. Your male counterpart? He gets a warning. Or maybe just a knowing wink and a reminder to be more careful. If he's particularly unlucky, the priest might corner him for a gentle talk about temptation, which ends with a joke and a handshake. After all, boys will be boys, and apparently medieval society thought ankle viewing was just a phase. For women, though, the consequences stack up. There's the risk of being called before the town court, where the charges are vague, but the judgment is very, very specific. Corrupting the morals of youth, leading men astray, dancing with excessive hip movement, the accusations blur together, always circling back to the same idea. If something indecent happened, surely a woman was behind it. Even evidence was optional. All it took was a rumor, a jealous neighbor, or a merchant's wife having a bad day. Punishments were creative, if not exactly fair. Women might be paraded through the streets, hair unbound, carrying a sign describing their sin. Some towns had the dreaded scold's bridle, a delightful metal contraption designed to stop you from talking back, which doubles as the world's worst orthodontic appliance. Public whippings, public prayers, or public penance. All with an audience, because apparently shame is more effective when the whole town is invited. The worst part? There was always a lecture, delivered by the nearest authority figure, be it priest, mayor, or a nun with particularly sharp elbows, about the importance of modesty, obedience, and avoiding undue attention. It never seemed to occur to anyone that undue attention was mostly created by the mob gathered to watch your humiliation. Men, meanwhile, enjoyed a kind of social invisibility cloak. If caught, their names weren't posted, their families weren't shamed. Often they could smooth things over with a coin, a promise, or just a sheepish grin. The very people scolding the women were the same ones quietly funding the local brothel, stopping by the bathhouse after Vespers, or suggesting just one drink after market day. In a pinch, a nobleman could claim he was conducting inspections or researching the effects of temptation for the benefit of his soul. No one believed it, but nobody cared to question too loudly either. And if a child was born out of wedlock, the blame landed squarely on the woman. She faced fines, banishment, or a life sentence of side-eye from every villager over the age of 30. The man? He might be encouraged to marry her, but more often he simply vanished to another village or negotiated his way out of responsibility with the help of an uncle and a goat. This double standard wasn't just social. It was written into law. Many towns kept separate ledgers for men and women, just to make sure the punishments were distributed as unevenly as possible. Even the church, for all its talk of forgiveness, had longer penances for women who strayed than for men who stumbled. After all, medieval forgiveness, like medieval plumbing, never quite worked the same for everyone. So next time you see a dusty square and a suspiciously sturdy set of stocks, remember, history might be boring, but its sense of fairness was anything but. In the great medieval blame game, the rules were simple. If you're a woman, you lose. If you're a man, try not to get caught. And if you're a chicken, steer clear of the stocks altogether. What happens when a baron gets caught in the wrong bedchamber? Usually, a quick law change, a small donation to the church, and absolutely zero consequences. Privilege is eternal. Let's set the scene. It's well past midnight in a drafty stone castle, and somewhere in the maze of corridors and creaking stairwells, a local baron is making his third inspection of the guest rooms. He claims he's checking for fire hazards, because naturally the best way to prevent disaster is to sneak into Lady Matilda's chambers wearing only your nightshirt and a look of forced innocence. Unfortunately, he's caught, not by an angry husband, but by a servant with a strong sense of duty and a talent for gossip. By dawn, half the castle knows. By lunch, the entire county does. You'd think this might spell trouble for the baron, a stern lecture, a heavy fine, perhaps a brief appearance in the stocks. Not quite. Medieval justice works on a sliding scale, and the higher your birth, the more, well, flexible the rules. First comes the noble scramble, a hurried meeting with the local priest, who is, coincidentally, enjoying a generous donation of wine and venison by sunset, followed by a hastily issued royal decree. It might go something like this. In recognition of Baron Godfrey's services to the crown, it is hereby declared that night inspections are both legal and commendable, provided they are conducted with suitable decorum and at least one witness who isn't the cook. Law changed. Problem solved. If there's any lingering scandal, it's smothered with a flurry of new rules, usually targeting everyone except the guilty party. No unmarried women in the West Wing after dark, or all windows must be bolted shut during full moons. Bonus points if the decree blames the incident on French influences or mischievous sprites. Local peasants, meanwhile, get new reasons to roll their eyes and pretend not to understand the latest etiquette update. Nobles have a special toolkit for surviving scandal. The first tool is money, a discreet gift to the church, some land, a gold chalice, or the right to name the next parish cow, works wonders for everyone's memory. If a nobleman's dalliances become too public, he might go on a pilgrimage, which is medieval code for hide in another castle until things blow over. Sometimes He writes a poem about penance, or builds a new chapel, conveniently located right next to his favorite tavern. Then there's the ancient art of blame deflection. It was never the Baron's fault. Maybe the moon was too bright. Maybe the guest beds were arranged confusingly. Or perhaps the real culprit is Lady Matilda, who should have locked her door more carefully. The legal term for this is creative storytelling, and the entire noble class are grandmasters. If anyone objects, they're gently reminded that complaining about a noble's behavior is itself a punishable offense, preferably with extra tithes and a stern warning about knowing your place. Even the king isn't immune. History is littered with tales of royal mischief swept under the rug, often by inventing new rugs. A royal decree can turn yesterday's crime into today's custom. The peasantry, of course, gets none of these benefits. If you're caught in the wrong bedchamber and your name isn't followed by of somewhere, expect the full tour: stocks, fines, sermons, and possibly a bonus lecture from Sister Agnes. This double standard is so blatant, it's practically tradition. When nobles break the rules simply bend to accommodate. The local scribe, resigned, keeps an extra bottle of ink for last-minute amendments. The rest of the town grumbles and memorizes the new loopholes, just in case. So next time you read about a baron caught inspecting a wine cellar, remember, in the medieval justice system, privilege really is eternal. If you've got enough gold, titles, or family portraits, the law is less a set of rules and more a suggestion, preferably one that comes with free venison. You think cancel culture is new? Medieval lawmakers were banning dirty jokes, racy songs, and even suggestive riddles long before the internet made it cool. Get caught singing in the tavern, and you might end up on a watch list. It's late evening in the local alehouse, and you're finally relaxing after a long day of dodging both creditors and chickens. The fire crackles, the ale flows, and a group of locals starts up a favorite tune, The Ballad of the Miller's Daughter, a classic that's equal parts scandal and agricultural advice. The crowd is loving it, clapping along and adding their own lines about turnips, goats, and that one night in the bishop's barn. It's all fun and games until you hear the dreaded clang of the beadle's staff at the door. Suddenly, the atmosphere chills faster than a medieval bathhouse in January. You freeze mid-chorus, mug halfway to your lips, praying the town watch didn't hear your verse about Lady Marjorie's mysterious midnight gardening. But no such luck. The beadle enters, eyebrow arched, ready to write down names and possibly lyrics for the official list of immoral activities. Medieval lawmakers were nothing, if not creative, and public joy was considered a dangerous gateway to chaos. Banning jokes and songs wasn't just about keeping people solemn. In a world where most folks couldn't read, songs and stories were the memes of their time. Tools for spreading news, poking fun at the powerful, and blowing off steam after another week of plague, famine, or questionable bread. But for the authorities, humor was suspicious, unpredictable, and far too democratic. What if someone snuck a sly jab at the mayor? What if the local lord's latest scandal made it into the refrain? So the lists grew longer. First, it was songs inappropriate for mixed company. Then jokes impugning the virtue of town officials. Pretty soon, even riddles about sheep could earn you a visit from the church warden. In medieval logic, all roads led to sheep-related sin. The official penalty? Fines, time in the stocks, or, worst of all, a mandatory attendance at a 3-hour sermon on the dangers of frivolity. Of course, the people found ways around it. New jokes popped up overnight, with the names changed just enough to fool the dullest constable. Travelling minstrels disguised racy songs as historical chronicles. And nobody dared stop the old women who sang spinning songs while weaving tales that would make a monk blush. Some pubs went underground, hosting secret laughter circles where entry was granted only if you could recite a tongue twister without smirking. Meanwhile, the town crier's job became a surreal performance. Be it known, henceforth, no resident shall repeat, rhyme, or recite the baker's naughty sonnet, nor the ode to Lady Matilda's stockings, upon penalty of bread ration reduction and public snubbing. Naturally, this only made the songs more popular. Before long, even the beadle was humming the tune on his walk home, quietly, of course. There were exceptions, mostly for the privileged. Nobles could laugh at whatever they pleased, and sometimes even commissioned the local jester to write custom roasts about their rivals. The rest of the town made do with coded humour, whispered tales, and the world's most elaborate eye rolls. If you did get caught, it was all about damage control. Plead ignorance. I thought it was a harvest song, your worship. Blame it on travellers. Must be those French minstrels again. Or, if all else fails, offer a bribe in the form of free ale and an especially boring story about your uncle's gout. So next time you're tempted to crack a joke in public, remember the brave souls who risked it all for a good laugh in the dark ages. In the end, the real crime wasn't the laughter. It was getting caught before the punchline. Imagine your job is to shout the local news, births, deaths. And also, Geoffrey was caught with his trousers off behind the fishmonger. The world's first viral scandal, shouted down the street at top volume. The medieval town crier is, in many ways, the original group chat notification. Only you can't mute him. He's alarmingly loud, and he has a bell that makes even the goats jump. Each day, he marches through the marketplace in his best tunic, slightly wine-stained, unrolling a scroll that seems to get longer every week. At first, it's the usual updates. Hear ye, hear ye. Alice, the miller's wife, has given birth to twins. Good people, remember. Market day is postponed due to mysterious puddles on High Street. All well and good, but then comes the shift. The tone drops, the voice deepens, and you know something spicy is about to be aired. Today's entertainment? The official indecency announcement. Let it be known throughout the parish. On the evening of St. Cuthbert's Eve, Geoffrey, son of Bertram, was apprehended in a state of disarray behind the fishmonger's stall and is henceforth fined 1 shilling and warned to avoid slippery eels in the future. The reactions are immediate. Heads pop out of windows. Children giggle behind their hands. The town's worst gossips scramble for their ink and parchment, ready to immortalize Geoffrey's humiliation in the next batch of neighborhood tales. No scandal is too small for the crier. If a chicken strays into the wrong garden, or someone's underpants are found fluttering from the bell tower, it's news. If a dignitary stumbles out of the bathhouse confused and in need of spiritual guidance, the crier will find a way to announce it that's technically factual, but highly creative. Medieval euphemism is an art form. Sundry persons were observed engaging in unlicensed merriment near the well. The real challenge? Delivery. Town criers must strike a balance between stern authority and barely contained amusement. Sometimes they can't help but add commentary. Let it also be known that Geoffrey's excuse that he was searching for shellfish has been received with skepticism. Or, Marjorie is reminded for the 4th time, goats are not permitted in church, regardless of occasion. Criers love the scandals, but they dread the aftermath. After a particularly juicy announcement, there's always fallout. Geoffrey might avoid the market for a week, but he can't escape the eel jokes that follow him everywhere. Local poets pen bawdy couplets about the incident. The fishmonger sells out by noon, just so customers can ask for the Geoffrey special. Even the priest can't resist a pointed sermon about the perils of nighttime seafood procurement. But not all news is so entertaining. Sometimes, the crier must read a list of forbidden songs, public shaming penalties, or the latest regulations from the bishop. These are met with eye rolls and quiet groans. The crier presses on, bell in hand, voice hoarse, knowing that in a town with no newspapers, he is the only source for both hard facts and soft gossip. As the day winds down, he returns home, ears ringing with the echo of his own voice. Sometimes he wonders what it's like to have a private life, Other times he just counts his coins, pours a mug of weak ale, and practices his delivery for tomorrow. Hear ye, hear ye. Let us all forget about Geoffrey's trousers, unless, of course, they turn up behind the bakery. So next time you hear breaking news, be grateful it isn't shouted outside your window, complete with full names and embarrassing details. In medieval times, everyone knew your business. And if you got caught with your trousers off, rest assured, it wasn't just between you and the fishmonger. It was a community event. Who needs detective work when you have professional snitches? Medieval towns ran on gossip, threats, and bribes tucked into bread loaves. If you wanted your secrets safe, you had better have very deep pockets. Picture yourself trying to keep a low profile in a town where every neighbor is one burnt pie away from blackmailing you. Forget trench coats and magnifying glasses. Here, the investigators wear aprons, push wheelbarrows, and never miss a chance to linger at your door with a knowing smile. The not-so-secret police are just ordinary townsfolk with the unique talent of being everywhere you don't want them to be. Especially when you're up to something even slightly interesting. Need to sneak down to the bathhouse after curfew? Expect to be followed by Mrs. Dodd, who has nothing better to do than catalogue unusual foot traffic. Think your tryst in the hayloft is private. Think again. The stable boy is already negotiating the price of his silence, one shiny coin. Or he tells his uncle, who tells the magistrate, who tells the entire town by the next market day. It's not just idle threats. Medieval towns ran on a currency of secrets, traded as casually as onions, and just as likely to make someone cry. Some families built entire empires out of what they overheard at church, behind hedges, or during long, innocent walks. There were housewives who moonlighted as informants, and alewives who kept mental ledgers longer than the Domesday Book. And then there's bribery, the grease in the gears of everyday life. A bribe could be coins, a loaf of bread, a fresh pie, or, if things were really serious, a favor to be collected later. You help me with my goose problem, and I forget about the time I saw you with that peddler from Norwich. Bread loaves were the preferred vehicle, mostly because nobody ever suspects the baker, and crumbs are less suspicious than wax seals. If someone showed up at your door with 2 loaves and a sly wink, you knew it was time to pay up or pray hard. The real fun begins when the not-so-secret police start working at cross purposes. Blackmailers blackmail other blackmailers. Bribed officials start bribing each other to keep quiet about the bribes they've received. At least once a year, the town crier loses his voice after a particularly complicated scandal involving a goat, a set of silver candlesticks, and the mayor's youngest daughter. The authorities, naturally, pretend to be shocked by this network of whispers and payouts. The town magistrate might thunder about corruption and the decline of morals during Sunday Mass. But by Monday, he's collecting a tidy forgetfulness fee from half the business owners in town. Local priests keep confession confidential. Unless, of course, they need to remind the church council who paid for the new bell tower. Every so often, a new bailiff arrives. Bright-eyed and eager to clean up the town. He lasts about 2 weeks, maybe 3, before being gently informed that everyone already knows about his private poetry readings with the cooper's wife. The lesson is clear. In the medieval world, the only thing more powerful than the law is the rumor mill, especially if you keep it well fed. For the average citizen, the rule is simple. Keep your secrets small, your bribes generous, and your enemies within arm's reach, but never closer than a loaf of bread. If you're ever caught, plead ignorance, blame the weather, and offer the beadle a pie for his troubles. It won't erase the past, but it might keep your name off the next town announcement. So next time you grumble about modern privacy concerns, remember, in medieval times, your whole life was one open secret, and the real penalty for mischief wasn't just getting caught, it was running out of bread. How did workers in the trade stay out of trouble? With quick feet, quicker lies, and the world's best collection of hiding spots. If you're not nimble, you're in the stocks. Welcome to the medieval workplace, where the HR department is a bucket of water, your manager is whoever's shouting loudest, and conflict resolution means outrunning the town beadle by a respectable distance. The art of survival isn't just about blending in, it's about always knowing where to hide, when to duck, and exactly how to explain away whatever you're caught doing, preferably with a straight face. First rule, know your exits. Every reputable establishment has at least 3. The front door, for customers and bailiffs with a taste for drama, the back alley, for discreet departures, and, if you're lucky, the roof. Medieval rooftops aren't exactly OSHA approved, but if you're running from the morality patrol, a quick scramble over the thatch might buy you enough time to invent an alibi. Next up, master the art of camouflage. This doesn't mean dressing as a shrub, unless it's May Day and everyone else is doing it. It means always having a second apron on hand, just in case you need to pass as a baker's assistant or blend into a group of traveling minstrels. The best workers know exactly how much flour to smudge on their face and how to hum a hymn at a moment's notice. No one suspects the pious. Your toolkit includes more than just a mop and a bucket. Keep a coin or two tucked in your sock for bribes, a length of twine for accidental tripwires, and a convincing sob story ready for any authority figure. I was only there to return a lost chicken works surprisingly well, especially if you can produce said chicken. The chicken does not have to be yours. Timing is everything. The morality patrol likes to make rounds right after Vespers and just before sunrise. So that's when you're on break. Ideally somewhere with a clear view of the street and a plausible reason to duck behind the barrels. Practice makes perfect. If you can slip out of sight faster than the barmaid can say, "Father Matthew's at the door," you're halfway to a clean record. Lying, of course, is an art form. Too detailed, and you look guilty. Too vague, and you look guilty. The trick is to stick to the classics. I was helping with charity work. It was a rehearsal for the Whitsuntide pageant, or, in desperate moments, I'm new here and terribly lost. If you can work in a reference to St. Agnes or the Bishop's Gout, you'll get extra points for creativity. Every seasoned worker knows to keep their ears open. The walls have ears, but so do the geese, the market vendors, and especially the local children. Children are the medieval equivalent of CCTV, and they will report everything if properly incentivized, with a sweet or sometimes out of sheer chaos. But the greatest skill? Knowing when to disappear completely. Sometimes, discretion is the better part of valor. If the town is buzzing about an incident at the bathhouse, it might be time to visit an aunt in the next village. Change your name, and return only when someone else has done something scandalous. In medieval towns, memory is short, but gossip is forever. Above all, keep your sense of humor and your dignity as intact as possible. There will always be another festival, another angry customer, another beadle convinced you're up to no good. But if you can outrun trouble, outwit the gossip, and outhide the other workers, you might just survive until payday, assuming the pay actually arrives. So, lace up those boots, practice your innocent face, and remember, in the world's oldest profession, survival isn't just a skill, it's an art. And if all else fails, blame the chicken. It's what Geoffrey would do. Some nights, laws were suspended, usually when the town council had a party planned. Suddenly, everything was legal until sunrise, when it was definitely not, and everyone pretended nothing happened. It's a typical Tuesday in medieval town, and the streets are as quiet as you'd expect after a week of relentless sermons on propriety. But then the word spreads, softly at first, through bakers' whispers and cryptic nods from the alewife. The council's hosting a private gathering tonight. That's your cue. If you're in the business of entertainment, discretion, or questionable stew, tonight is your night. In a flash, every rule in the town charter is quietly set aside. The no singing after sundown law, sung right through. No dancing within 50 paces of the church. The council's clerk is leading the conga line, The local beadle, sworn enemy of mirth, has been invited to supervise refreshments, which, in practical terms, means he's asleep on a bench by 10 o'clock, snoring under a garland of festive onions. For workers in the trade, it's a gold rush. The bathhouse is suddenly the hottest ticket in town. People who normally cross the street to avoid eye contact are now slipping inside doors with a wink and a purse full of coins. The mayor's brother, who last week denounced the scourge of carnal excess, is playing the lute in the corner and making up rhymes that would make a sailor blush. Of course, there's still a veneer of official respectability. Someone puts a wreath of holly on the door for charity. The scribe is taking notes for historical purposes, and the parish priest is passing through on his way to evening prayers for 2 hours. At one point, a member of the council proposes a toast to civic unity, while everyone pretends not to notice he's toasting with bathhouse wine. Midnight is the magic hour. For one night, nobody cares about the bylaws. Masks are worn, sometimes literal, sometimes metaphorical. The ale flows, the music plays, and even the strictest matrons are spotted swapping riddles in a shadowy corner, giggling like teenagers. The air is thick with the scent of roast goose, strong beer, and the unmistakable tang of "we're all going to regret this at sunrise." But sunrise always comes, and with it, the collective hangover, both literal and legal. The streets are swept, the evidence disposed of, and every participant becomes an actor in the world's least convincing cover-up. "Did you see what happened last night?" asks the baker's wife, eyes twinkling. "Oh, I was home with the children, reading the Psalms," replies the mayor's brother, his lute mysteriously missing a string. By breakfast, the normal order has returned. The beadle is back to his bell. The priest is back to his scolding. And the council is passing a new emergency morality ordinance, just in case anyone gets ideas about a repeat performance. If you're unlucky enough to get caught breaking a rule today, you're doubly shamed. "You should have saved your shenanigans for Tuesday," says the beadle, as if it's the most natural thing in the world. For workers in the trade, these nights are legendary. Tips are generous, fines are forgotten, and for once, everyone's in on the joke. But discretion is everything. The only thing worse than talking about the party is pretending you weren't there. So everyone shares a wink, a knowing nod, and a mutual agreement to never mention the lute incident again. And thus the medieval tradition of the temporary ban endures, proof that, even in the strictest times, rules are bendable, memories are selective, and nothing unites a town quite like the promise that whatever happened last night never happened at all. Fun fact: some cathedrals were literally built using taxes from the very people they condemned on Sunday. That stained glass window? Paid for by fines collected from unlawful gatherings. It's early morning, and you're dragging yourself through the market square, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, when the church bells start tolling, loud, insistent, and just a bit smug. You glance up at the grand new cathedral rising over the town, every stone an advertisement for piety, virtue, and, if you squint, the town's unique approach to creative accounting. See, medieval sin wasn't just a spiritual problem, it was a business opportunity. Every time someone was caught breaking a law, maybe for singing a bawdy tune, hosting an unauthorized festival, or enjoying the wrong company in the bathhouse, they were fined. The money went straight into the church's coffers. "Support the glory of God," the priest intoned. And also, maybe, that new golden candlestick. If you ask the locals, they'll tell you, nobody really understood how the math worked. The annual Virtue fundraiser was always announced with great fanfare, "Help us finish the new bell tower." But you noticed the bell tower somehow never quite got finished, while the bishop's wine cellar mysteriously expanded each year. Still, no one dared complain too loudly. If you did, there was always a risk of the public penance surcharge, extra coins for your troubles, and a spot cleaning the church steps with a borrowed toothbrush. For those in the trade, the sin tax was just another part of doing business. Brothel keepers and bathhouse owners built the fines into their prices, joking that every visit came with a cathedral contribution. Regular customers could spot which windows were new thanks to the extra-large donations after festival season. Even the stained glass told a story. This window brought to you by last year's Midsummer Scandal and partially sponsored by Jeffrey for services rendered. What's truly miraculous is the sheer efficiency of it all. The church ran a well-oiled system of collection and record-keeping. If you so much as whispered a naughty limerick, someone was there, quill in hand, ready to add your name to the list of donors. Refuse to pay, and you could find yourself locked out of Mass, or worse, missing from the list of recipients for the annual bread and ale charity, which coincidentally was also funded by sin tax proceeds. The townsfolk developed a grudging respect for the whole operation. On Sunday, they knelt in the shadow of soaring arches and listened to sermons about purity, while sunlight streamed through windows paid for by the very behavior being condemned. You'd see the baker's wife, who was fined for immodest laughter at Michaelmas, admiring the intricate glasswork her giggle had funded. If you looked closely, you might spot the stonemason winking at the brothel keeper, both secretly proud of their contribution to local architecture. For the clergy, it was a delicate dance. Too many fines and people got creative with hiding their vices. Too few, and the roof started leaking again. Every new sin tax came with a carefully crafted sermon about supporting the house of God, delivered with extra emphasis whenever a new project was on the horizon. The bishop knew when to lean into mercy, let us forgive, after you pay the fine, of course, and when to remind everyone that the wages of sin is death. But the proceeds are looking very promising. And so, stone by stone, penny by penny, the cathedrals rose. Medieval towns became monuments to moral flexibility. A little gilt, a little gold, and a stained glass window with more secrets than saints. The next time you visit an ancient cathedral and marvel at its grandeur, just remember, somewhere in the flickering candlelight, the echoes of 1,000 medieval misdemeanors are holding up the roof. So, pay your fines, admire the glass, and rest easy. Your contribution is eternal, at least until next year's fundraising scandal. Forget legal evidence. In a medieval town, all it took was 3 neighbors, 2 rumors, and a jealous fishwife to get you hauled before the judge. Court cases started with "I heard" and ended with a fine. Imagine living in a world where your worst enemy isn't plague, famine, or taxes. It's the neighbor with the best hearing and the loosest lips. Gossip isn't just a pastime, it's the judicial system's secret fuel. You might think you're safe, tiptoeing home after a perfectly innocent evening at the bathhouse. But the second you pass old widow Elspeth's window, you're already on trial. The rules are simple. If enough people talk about you, it must be true. Truth, in medieval law, is less about evidence and more about volume. You don't need a crime scene, just a chorus. If 3 people swear they saw you leaving the wrong door, the law says that's practically a confession. Your Honor, I distinctly heard Agnes say she overheard Thomas tell his wife he saw you in the alley. Case closed. And once you're accused, the machinery kicks in. First come the subtle glances in the market. The baker suddenly short, changes you. The tanner's wife stops lending you her good spoon. Next, the public questions. "Didn't I see you out late last Tuesday?" someone asks, voice sweet but eyes sharp. Your answers are irrelevant. The narrative is already out of your hands. You're summoned before the town judge, who, let's be honest, knows all the gossip before you even sit down. Medieval courtrooms aren't grand, wood-paneled halls. They're more like crowded back rooms, heavy with anticipation and the faint smell of onion pie. The judge clears his throat, and the witnesses step forward, one by one. No one remembers exactly what you did, only that someone said something. And where there's smoke, there's fire. Your defense? Hope the judge remembers that time you shared your plum tart at Whitsuntide, or that you once returned his missing chicken. Logic is a last resort. You can deny the rumors, but it just makes you look more suspicious. You can claim you were helping a friend, but everyone knows helping a friend is medieval code for definitely guilty. You try to change the subject. Have you seen the bishop's new hat? But nobody's buying it. The penalty is rarely jail. That's for real criminals, like bread thieves and ambitious geese. Instead, it's fines, public penance, or, for repeat offenders, the classic stocks. You get off lucky if the worst outcome is a forced apology and a few weeks of cold stares at Sunday Mass. For the unlucky, a round of public humiliation is just the start. Gossip is like medieval glitter, impossible to clean up, sticking to you through every festival and feast. But the worst part isn't the sentence, it's the aftermath. The verdict doesn't end the rumors, it gives them legs. Even if you're found not guilty, you're now that one with the trial. Children repeat your name in rhymes. The fishwife adds your story to her repertoire, embellishing the details with every retelling. You become a legend in your own time, just not the kind you'd choose. Clever folk learn to navigate the minefield. Lay low, keep your secrets, bribe the gossip mongers with fresh eggs, and never, ever let the truth get in the way of a good story. Better yet, find someone more interesting to stand near at the next festival. Medieval justice is fickle, but it's always hungry for new material. So next time you hear a rumor, remember, in the Middle Ages, gossip wasn't just idle chatter, it was the law. Keep your head down, your friends close, and your alibis airtight. And if the fishwife starts asking questions, maybe it's time to move towns. Or at least switch to a less conspicuous hat. Sometimes, the only option was to get out of town. Disguises, aliases, and a very fast horse. Medieval solutions to problems that are still relevant after every awkward family reunion. You know things have gone sideways when you see your name on the town crier's scroll. Or worse, when your mother is waiting at the door with that look that says, explanation first, dinner never. Maybe you were caught in the bathhouse after hours. Or perhaps it was just bad luck and a jealous neighbor with a sharp tongue. Whatever the reason, you're faced with a choice every medieval troublemaker knows by heart. Stick around and face the music, or dust off your best escape plan. Running from the law was practically a rite of passage in medieval towns. The local authorities, after all, were rarely faster than the average goat. What you lacked in legal standing, you could make up for in speed, creativity, and an impressive collection of fake moustaches, or, if funds were tight, just some borrowed soot and a hat 2 sizes too big. Disguises were surprisingly effective. If you could blend into a group of traveling minstrels, claim to be a distant cousin from the next village, or simply swap aprons with a friendly baker, half the town might forget your face by the end of the week. Aliases were the next line of defense. Everyone knew that Gerald the Pious was just Geoffrey after his third syntax, and Lady Joan of Elsewhere was last year's mayor's daughter after an incident involving a cow and a missing wedding ring. You'd invent a tragic backstory, complete with a far-off village no one had ever heard of, I'm from Upper Thistlewood, you wouldn't know it, and hope nobody asks too many questions about the dialect. Travel itself was the ultimate medieval escape. Pack your things, meaning whatever you could grab in under 5 minutes, a sturdy cloak, some dried bread, a questionable coin purse, and hit the road. If you were lucky, you had a horse. If not, you made do with fast feet and a creative shortcut through the barley fields. Local roads were full of would-be fugitives, most of them less running from the law and more running from their mother's disappointed sighs. The best escape artists made it an art form. They left decoys, half-eaten porridge, a pillow under the blanket, a note pinned to the door, gone to contemplate my sins, back in a fortnight. Sometimes they even left rumors of their own. I heard he's joined a monastery, or she's living with her aunt in Normandy. Half the town would spend weeks swapping stories, none the wiser that you were living in plain sight, just 2 streets over, with a fake beard and a new name. Of course, no escape was perfect. Medieval towns were tight-knit and news traveled fast. You could run, but you couldn't outrun gossip. The beadle's cousin's wife always seemed to spot you at the worst moment, and your mother's network of informants put the king's spies to shame. More than one escape attempt ended in a sheepish return home and a very long, very public apology. Yet, for those who made it work, life on the run had its perks. New town, new friends, new chances to get into slightly different trouble. You learned which inns had soft beds and which ones were run by the bishop's brother. You discovered that in the next village, nobody cared about last month's scandal, as long as you paid your taxes and didn't try to steal anyone's goat. And so, the medieval tradition of the Great Escape lived on. Whether you were fleeing a judge, a jilted lover, or the world's most persistent mother, your best bet was a new disguise, a plausible story, and a running head start. If nothing else, you could always claim you were on a pilgrimage, a time-honored excuse for anyone who needed to leave town fast, no questions asked. So next time you think about skipping a family gathering, just remember medieval folks did it first. And with far worse disguises. Every holy day meant a new rule about who could do what, where, and with whom. Navigating these calendars was like trying to assemble IKEA furniture with no instructions and half the pieces missing. You wake up to church bells ringing and immediately wonder, is today a day of fasting, feasting, or frantically pretending you remember which saint it is? In medieval town life, every festival brings a flurry of regulations, half of which change with the seasons, and the rest seem invented that morning by the parish priest in a burst of creative energy. One day you're forbidden from dancing, the next you're ordered to join hands in the market square and hop in a circle for St. Hilarious Day. Participation is mandatory, but so is confusion. Let's start with the basics. The medieval calendar is an unholy jumble of feast days, fasts, saints' birthdays, martyrdom anniversaries, miracle celebrations, and the occasional emergency holiday declared by the bishop after a particularly good harvest. Each comes with its own set of do's and don'ts. On some days, meat is a sin. On others, it's practically compulsory. Beer is either blessed or banned, depending on how the priest is feeling, and whether the brew was donated to the church cellar. For people in the trade, brothel keepers, bathhouse attendants, traveling entertainers, these holidays are a logistical nightmare. Lent? Close your doors, burn your finest bedsheets, and pray no one remembers your name until Easter. Easter? Open wide, because apparently everyone's feeling both spiritual and festive. The rules flip so fast, you half expect to see a monk spinning a wheel of morality in the churchyard, announcing, "Today, only left-handed pottage is permitted." The trick is to keep your ear to the ground. If the town crier shouts, "Abstinence in all things," you'd better cancel the party and start baking extra bread for penance. If the beadle's whistling and the mayor's already tipsy by noon, it's a sure sign the next 12 hours are a no-rules holiday. For everyone except the baker's apprentice, who's still banned from pie-eating contests after last Whitsun, it gets especially complicated when holidays overlap. St. Agnes's Day and the Festival of the Assumption both land on Thursday? Congratulations! No one knows what to do. Some families hedge their bets, no music until noon, meet only after sunset, and a cautious, half-hearted attempt at singing a hymn while stirring the stew. Then there's the matter of with whom. Certain days are strictly for family, others allow friends, neighbors, and that one mysterious stranger who always turns up during festivals with suspiciously good wine. Rules about who can gather where shift like sand. One week, bathhouses are off limits. The next, they're mandatory for spiritual cleansing before Mass. Naturally, everyone breaks the rules. The most creative offenders find loopholes, a charity supper that's actually a dance, a prayer circle that devolves into dice games, or a pilgrimage that just happens to end at the tavern. If you're caught, the punishment is usually mild, a fine, an extra prayer, or the world's most judgmental glance from Sister Agnes. But despite the chaos, or maybe because of it, the town somehow muddles through. Every festival is a test of memory, luck, and improvisational guilt. By nightfall, everyone's tired, overfed, and convinced they've either sinned terribly or achieved minor sainthood. Sometimes both, depending on which bell was ringing at the time. So as you drift off to sleep, listening to the fading echoes of the latest holy day, you make a note to yourself. Check the calendar first thing tomorrow. Because in medieval town life, the only thing more complicated than the rules is trying to explain, in confession, why you spent St. Crispin's Eve eating salted pork, dancing in the street, and accidentally winning the bishop's hat. Every few years, a new bishop would arrive, declare war on sin, and clean house. Brothels closed, fines soared, and everyone pretended they'd never even heard a dirty joke in their life. You wake up to a chill in the air. Not just the usual draft from your single-glazed window, but the sharper, more ominous chill of moral reform. There's a new bishop in town, and he's determined to prove that the path to sainthood is paved with paperwork, closed doors, and the occasional public bonfire of suspiciously lacy undergarments. It starts with a sermon, delivered at a volume that shakes the stained glass and leaves everyone squirming on their benches. By noon, word has spread. No more brothels, no more bathhouse parties. And if you even think about singing the Song of the Wanton Shepherd, you'll be scrubbing the cathedral floor until Christmas. The town's professional fun makers, brothel keepers, minstrels, bathhouse managers know the drill. The moment the bishop starts waving his new list of moral concerns, shutters close, candles go out, and windowsills once decorated with a tasteful lavender bouquet now feature only wilted leeks and an out-of-business sign. If you want to stay in business, you'll need to invent a new trade fast. Herbal remedies, soup of unspecified origin, or the ever-popular temporary boarding for widows and traveling nuns. The fines, they multiply like rabbits. There's the purity levy, the immodest laughter tax, and the annual virtue contribution collected in coin, chickens, or occasionally a suspiciously plump duck. If you're unlucky, you'll find yourself called before the bishop's new morality tribunal, a room full of stern-faced clerics who can sniff out guilt from across the market square. You're invited to explain why you own 3 pairs of red hose and what exactly you were doing at the bakehouse after Vespers. Bread making, your grace. Extra kneading. Public life changes overnight. The tavern is suddenly silent. Even the town crier sticks to strictly approved messages, births, deaths, and stern warnings against unsupervised dancing. Children are forbidden from playing games of excess cheerfulness. The mayor's annual feast becomes a tepid affair, featuring boiled cabbage, long prayers, and an unconvincing round of Guess the Psalm. For a while, the bishop seems to be winning. The streets are quieter, the confession lines are longer, and even the local geese waddle more sedately. But beneath the surface, everyone is just waiting it out. Behind every shuttered door, stories are swapped about the last purge. Remember when Bishop Bartholomew banned cheese and 3 nuns eloped with the carpenter? New codes emerge. An extra candle in the window means a secret gathering. A pie left on the step is an invitation to underground merriment. The town's black market for jokes, songs, and good wine thrives. And then, as suddenly as it began, the purge fizzles. The bishop, worn out by paperwork, and a distinct lack of confessions from anyone except Geoffrey, who confesses weekly for the attention, moves on to a bigger diocese or a quieter retirement. The doors creak open, the bathhouse is miraculously repaired, and the brothel returns as a community wellness center. The crier adds a few extra flourishes to the news, and the children go back to excess cheerfulness, now twice as sneaky. The cycle repeats every few years. Each new bishop arrives with fire and brimstone. Each leaves with a closet full of unopened complaint letters and a lingering suspicion that no one, anywhere has ever truly stopped laughing. The fines fund a new bell. The virtue contribution pays for a fresh set of altar cloths. And everyone nods solemnly in church, all while planning the next big festival, quietly, of course. So next time someone threatens a crackdown, just remember, in the medieval world, morality was mostly for sale, and sooner or later, the party always came back, louder, smarter, and slightly better at hiding the wine. If you thought the church was harsh, wait until you hear what medieval doctors prescribed for uncontrollable urges. Most treatments involved herbs, bleeding, and long walks in the rain. Romance was strictly discouraged. Picture this. You're in the throes of a forbidden crush. Maybe it's the way the baker's apprentice laughs at your jokes, or the glimpse of ankle you caught at the market. Scandalous, and definitely not recommended by any local nun. But before you can even consider acting on your feelings, your neighbor notices you humming Greensleeves a little too cheerfully and reports you to the parish priest, who, in turn, forwards your name to the village physician. Because in medieval Europe, the doctor was less a healer of bodies and more a gatekeeper of morality. Uncontrollable urges was the polite term for anything resembling affection, attraction, or thinking about someone with fewer than 3 layers of wool. The local medical advice started simple. Try a cold bath, a stern talking. 2. And, if you're really suffering, a dose of bitter herbs designed to cool the blood. Translation: you'll be too busy grimacing to flirt with anyone for days. But if the symptoms persisted, things escalated. The next step was bleeding, based on the theory that too much hot blood was making you dangerous. Out came the leeches, the lancets, and the world's least romantic house call. Nothing says I love you quite like a prescription to lose a pint of blood in your own kitchen. Other remedies bordered on the superstitious. A favorite involved sending you out for a long, chilly walk, preferably during a rainstorm, ideally through a swamp. The cold, damp, and general misery were thought to drive away impure thoughts. Bonus points if you returned home so bedraggled that no one could find you attractive, not even yourself. If herbs and leeches failed, the doctor might recommend a diet of bland foods, boiled barley, stale bread, and water so weak even the town ducks turned up their beaks. Spices were forbidden, as everyone knew that nutmeg, cinnamon, and a pinch of pepper could send the most pious soul into a downward spiral of daydreams about the blacksmith's biceps. And then there was the dreaded diagnosis of love melancholy. If your sighing became too audible, or you were spotted gazing wistfully into the middle distance, you risked being confined to your home, forced to recite penitential psalms, or assigned extra hours helping Sister Agnes clean the chapel floor. If the condition became truly dire, the priest and the doctor would join forces to prescribe a full week of fasting, prayer, and absolutely no contact with the outside world. Medieval quarantine, but for feelings. Actual romance, when not the stuff of anonymous poetry and secret glances, was considered a medical risk. Married couples might be allowed a grudging blessing for their duties, but any sign of joy or affection was viewed with deep suspicion. The only people who got away with open passion were traveling minstrels, who were expected to be scandalous, and even then, they had to leave town before anyone's mother found out. All of this led to an elaborate culture of coded courtship. Secret tokens were exchanged in bread loaves, glances were traded beneath prayer shawls, and love letters doubled as shopping lists for extra onions. If you were caught, you could always claim it's just a symptom of bad humors and hope the doctor didn't have any leeches handy. So next time you hear someone talk about the good old days of romance, remember, in the Middle Ages, love was less about moonlit walks and more about herbal tea, strategic denial, and always having an alibi ready for the town physician. Because when it came to matters of the heart, medieval medicine's real prescription was simple: stop it, or else. Eventually the world moved on, sort of. The laws changed. The trade went underground. and everyone pretended that nothing scandalous ever happened. Except, of course, it still did. History's greatest tradition, denial. Picture it, the final days of the official morality patrol, their bells ringing out with less conviction, their lists growing shorter every week. The beadle, once feared for his sharp eye and sharper stick, is now mostly ignored as he strolls the streets, whistling the same forbidden tune he used to fine people for singing. The townsfolk have grown tired of the endless cycles: new bishop, new crackdown, new round of emergency confessions, followed by the inevitable slow return to business as usual. The great unwritten rule of medieval life is simple. If you make something illegal, people just get better at hiding it. As the years passed and the laws on vice multiplied, so did the creativity of the people who wanted to bend them. Brothels became guest houses. Bathhouses doubled as herbal clinics. Parties were held in cellars, barns, and, once, on a river barge that mysteriously sank after too many people danced the forbidden jig. The local authorities, for their part, perfected the art of looking the other way. Fewer public punishments, more warnings, and a growing file of unsolved cases of suspiciously merry gatherings. The town crier, once forced to announce every little scandal, now devoted more time to lost chickens and less to naming names. If you heard about someone getting in trouble, it was almost always second-hand. I heard from Agnes, who heard from the butcher's wife, who saw something behind the bakery, but don't quote me. Meanwhile, the church quietly retired its most dramatic sermons. Confession became less about cataloguing every impure thought and more about the usual complaints. My neighbour's noisy pig, my own questionable gambling losses, that time I ate all the cheese meant for the winter fast. The priests themselves, perhaps relieved to skip the annual purity inspection, turned a blind eye to the more harmless mischief. After all, everyone needs a hobby. What really killed the old vice laws wasn't just exhaustion, it was economics. As cities grew, so did trade, travel, and the need for a little entertainment after a long week in the mud. More people meant more anonymity, more loopholes, and less interest in policing every laugh, tune, or questionable ankle. Eventually, the fines couldn't keep up with the ingenuity of the rule breakers. When even the bishop's nephew was caught inspecting the new bathhouse for the third time, everyone quietly agreed to move on, but the denial stuck around. Generations grew up hearing that nothing like that ever happened in our day, while simultaneously inheriting secret family recipes for spiced wine, coded signals for after-hours meetings, and the knowledge of which cellar door to knock on for a really good time. In public, virtue remained a point of pride. In private, everyone winked, shrugged, and shared stories about the old days when things were wild. And so, medieval vice laws faded into history, not with a final scandal or dramatic midnight riot, but with a slow, collective shrug. The world became a little more complicated, a little less scandalized, and, for the first time, people could sleep through the night without worrying that the next sunrise would bring a new rule, a new fine, or a nun with a bucket of holy water at their door. Of course, none of this meant the end of scandal. As long as there were secrets, there were stories. And as long as there was history, there was denial. The official scrolls said the laws were gone, but the backrooms, cellars, and whispered tales told a different story. So next time you hear someone claim the past was pure and peaceful, just remember, the real medieval tradition wasn't vice or virtue. It was pretending nobody ever got caught, and quietly passing the secret on. Every medieval town had that one street, usually near the city walls, the river, or suspiciously close to the town bakery, where the houses were not quite as respectable as the others. If you lived there, your property value plummeted. Your mother pretended she didn't know you, and the neighbors became experts in looking the other way. Urban renewal, medieval style. Just change the street name and hope the bishop never visits. You find yourself wandering through town, following the scent of fresh bread and the not-so-faint undertone of something much less wholesome. The cobblestones here are a little more worn, the laughter a touch louder, and the windows glow just a bit brighter at night. Welcome to the other side of town. The street with a dozen names and a reputation twice as long. Sometimes it's called Nightingale Lane, other times Back Alley. And if the bishop is in town, everyone insists it's just Baker's Row and definitely not a den of iniquity. Real estate agents, if such a profession had existed, would have dreaded this stretch. Even the most enterprising widow couldn't convince her cousin to move in. The rent is suspiciously cheap, but the gossip is expensive. The most telling sign you've crossed into the wrong neighborhood? The town beadle speeds up his rounds. The nuns cross themselves as they pass, and children are warned not to linger after dark, though they always do. The houses themselves aren't much different from anywhere else. Timber frames, smoke curling from the chimney, laundry flapping bravely in the breeze. But the details give everything away. A red cloth, an extra lantern, a door that never quite closes. The hostelries on this street specialize in late-night guests and strong ale. And the bakers somehow always have extra rolls for those who come in after midnight. If you ask too many questions, you'll get directions to the other bakery, the one with fewer rumors and, sadly, drier bread. For those who live here, life is a complicated balancing act. Reputation is everything, and the people on these streets become masters of plausible deniability. "I'm just renting a room," you'll hear. "My cousin is visiting. The music? Oh, that's just a very enthusiastic prayer meeting. On festival days, the whole area miraculously transforms. Banners are swapped for holy symbols, windows are shuttered, and the singing, if it happens at all, is all in Latin. The bishop, of course, knows exactly what's going on. So does the mayor, the miller, and anyone who's ever misplaced their spouse after sunset. But as long as things stay discreet, the street is tolerated, provided the taxes are paid, the bribes delivered on time, and the local priest receives an extra loaf or two at Easter. Occasionally, a new official tries to clean up the area, only to find that half the council has business interests in the local tavern. Living here comes with perks, endless stories, the best gossip, and a sense of camaraderie unmatched anywhere else. If trouble brews, the whole street bands together. Need a hiding place? Try the pie shop. Looking to avoid the morality patrol? There's a coded knock for that. It's a world of secrets, alliances, and survival, where everyone's reputation is a little tarnished and a lot more interesting. Of course, moving up in the world means moving out of the neighborhood. Those who do manage to relocate always insist they never look back. Except, perhaps, for the occasional loaf of midnight bread or a friendly wink from an old neighbor. Urban renewal in medieval style is simple. Slap a new name on the sign, change the curtains, and hope the bishop stays on the other side of town. So next time you hear about a street with a reputation, remember, in the Middle Ages, every town had one, and it was as much a part of community life as the market square or the church. You just didn't talk about it, at least not in front of your mother. Just because you took a vow of chastity doesn't mean temptation took a vow to leave you alone. Medieval records are full of monks and nuns caught sneaking out after dark, meeting behind hedges, or sending scandalous notes disguised as Bible verses. The church's response? More rules, more walls, and a lot of praying. The Archbishop never asks about Sister Agnes's extended evening walks. You might think a monastery is all silence, contemplation, and the faint sound of a single bell. But if you stay up late enough, you'll notice that not everyone's in bed after Compline. Maybe you hear soft footsteps along the cloister, a door creak, and a muffled giggle that is definitely not part of the prescribed evening prayers. It turns out that, even in the holiest of places, hormones are not deterred by stone walls and strict bedtimes. For monks and nuns, daily life is a tapestry of rules: prayers at dawn, work in the gardens, strict silence at meals, and a never-ending parade of tasks designed to keep the mind away from worldly thoughts. But as anyone who's ever tried not to think about elephants knows, the best way to ensure someone thinks about something is to forbid it. And so, the forbidden flourished, quietly, often literally under the cover of darkness, and almost always with plausible deniability. Monasteries were their own tiny societies, and everyone knew the tricks. There were special signals, 3 knocks on a cell door, a scrap of cloth left on a windowsill, a strategically placed psalm in the communal Bible, meet me behind the herb garden at Matins. Some nuns became skilled in embroidery, stitching elaborate codes into their tapestries that only the most observant friar would decipher. Monks, meanwhile, were forever volunteering for extra errands to the neighboring convent, always for the glory of God. The church authorities naturally doubled down. New rules forbade unsupervised gardening, solitary walks, and even excessive eye contact during Vespers. Walls were raised, doors reinforced, and a new position was invented, the watch nun, whose job was to keep an eye out for any sign of inappropriate joy. The more rules added, the more creative the lovers became. Medieval ingenuity at its finest, just applied to romance instead of architecture. Of course, when affairs were discovered, the punishments were legendary. A wayward monk might be reassigned to a remote priory with nothing to do but copy psalms until he forgot the sound of laughter. Nuns found guilty of unruly affections could face penance, extra prayers, and a stern talking to from the abbess, who, more often than not, had her own collection of love letters stashed in a shoe. But the risks didn't stop anyone for long. Forbidden love stories flourished, passed down in whispers and bad poetry. Some even entered local folklore. Sister Agnes and the Midnight Turnip, Brother Anselm and the Disappearing Psalter, tales as dramatic as any courtly romance, just with more mud and fewer happy endings. The villagers, always eager for gossip, kept score and made bets. If you saw a monk buying extra sweets at the market, you knew he wasn't planning to eat them all himself, and sometimes the church itself quietly looked the other way. A happy monastery is a productive one, and a little mischief, properly managed, was just the cost of doing business. The bishop might thunder about virtue on Sunday, but by Monday he was back to dealing with the roof leaks and the garden mole problem. Priorities, after all. So, as you drift off, picture the cloisters not as perfectly pure, but as a place of whispered secrets, careful glances, and the eternal struggle between rules and reality. Because even in the most sacred places, love and mischief always find a way. Just ask Sister Agnes if you can catch her during one of her extended evening walks. Traveling entertainers were the Instagram influencers of the medieval world, suspicious, colorful, and somehow everywhere you didn't want your children to be. Outsiders were often blamed for corrupting local morals, spreading new dance moves, or introducing scandalous fashion from the next kingdom over. If anything indecent happened, blame the guy with the lute and the funny hat. You're enjoying a quiet market day when you spot them, a ragtag band of minstrels rolling in with patched-up cloaks, strange accents, and a donkey that looks ready to unionize. One starts strumming a lute, another juggles apples, badly, and a third launches into a tale about a goose, a knight, and a bishop's embarrassing wardrobe malfunction. In seconds, every child in town has abandoned their chores, and half the adults are pretending not to listen, ears perked for the punchline. But not everyone is delighted. The baker's wife frowns at the new foreign rhythm, convinced it's going to make her daughter's feet do something unholy. The town elders whisper about dangerous ideas and the risk of someone learning a dance step the priest hasn't personally approved. Meanwhile, the minstrels, with their jolly songs and wild stories, just keep collecting coins and compliments from anyone with a pulse. Medieval townsfolk love entertainment, but only the safe, homegrown kind. Anything new or unfamiliar is suspicious. If the local girls suddenly show up wearing ribbons in their hair the French way, you can bet someone will blame the traveling puppeteer. The same goes for that new spicy stew recipe or the rumor that laughing during Vespers keeps the devil away. Minstrels and outsiders are the perfect scapegoats. Here today, gone tomorrow, impossible to subpoena. And when something goes wrong, the blame is instant. The mayor's nephew is caught sneaking out after curfew. It's the fault of those wandering storytellers. The annual festival devolves into a conga line. That's what happens when you let minstrels near the punch bowl. Someone is overheard humming a song about onions and love in the churchyard. Foreign influence, clearly. Never happened before the loot arrived. Yet, for all the suspicion, nobody actually wants the minstrels to leave. They bring news from distant lands, scandalous tales about the king's cousin's wedding, jokes about the weather in Rome, and, occasionally, hints about fashion trends 3 centuries ahead of their time. If you need a secret delivered to another town, or an insult disguised as a song, they're your best bet. They're also experts in plausible deniability. When the bishop visits, the minstrels perform only the most pious hymns, faces full of innocence, while passing notes about the best ale in the county. Outsiders in general have it rough. Merchants from distant cities are suspect. Wandering herbalists are probably witches, and anyone who doesn't know all 7 verses of the local harvest song is viewed as a potential saboteur. But outsiders also serve as the social reset button. After a scandal, a festival, or just a particularly rowdy Thursday, it's comforting to blame the weirdos with the painted donkey. In the end, the minstrels roll out of town, pockets a little fuller, leaving behind a trail of slightly confused goats, and at least one new catchphrase that everyone swears they'll never use. But did you see the mayor dance? The elders breathe a sigh of relief. The priest delivers a sermon on the dangers of novelty, and life returns to normal until next time. So as you tuck yourself in, remember, in the Middle Ages, nothing said, change is coming like a stranger with a song, a cart full of costumes, and an accent nobody could quite place. If something goes awry, blame the minstrels, and then quietly hope they come back soon. After all, someone needs to teach the baker's wife that new dance move. If there's one thing that never changes, it's the human ability to find a loophole. When medieval authorities cracked down on unlawful gatherings, suddenly every party became a theatrical rehearsal or a charity event. The oldest defense in the book? We're practicing for the parish mystery play. Bonus points if you could rope in a minor noble as the lead actor. It's a blustery evening, and you find yourself squeezed into the back room of the local tavern, surrounded by the town's most suspiciously enthusiastic singers and exactly one lute that's never quite in tune. The candles are dimmed, the curtains drawn, and the door is guarded by the blacksmith, who claims he's just checking for woodworm. The moment the beadle pokes his head in, everyone sits up straighter, clutching their scripts and muttering about Act 2 and stage direction. The fact that nobody can remember what the play is about is beside the point. Unlawful gathering? No, officer. Just a little dress rehearsal for St. Bartholomew's miracle. Very sacred. The beadle frowns, tries to catch someone in a giggle, and is offered a part as Silent Shepherd number 2. For some reason, he never accepts, but he also never stays long. Plausible deniability is the star of tonight's show. Loopholes are the medieval way of life. Every time the rules tighten, the excuses get more creative. Too many people caught dancing after dark. It's not a party, it's choreography practice for the midsummer pageant. Found with a suspicious number of pies and flagons, that's hospitality training for the visiting bishop, who, if rumors are true, once played a donkey in last year's nativity scene. Invite a noble to join, and suddenly, what would have been a scandal becomes an important cultural investment. The bishop himself might even pop by, just to supervise the moral tone of Act 3. The beauty of the we're rehearsing excuse is its versatility. It explains away music, laughter, questionable costumes, and even the odd goat in the pantry. Essential prop, Your Grace. There are entire plays invented on the spot for these purposes. The Redemption of Sir Geoffrey, a deeply moving story that conveniently involves a lot of feasting and zero dialogue for the town watch. Charity events are another crowd favorite. Every slightly raucous gathering is transformed by the addition of a donation jar, a few coins in a wooden bowl, a half-hearted speech about orphans or new church bells, and you've bought yourself a night of almost legal revelry. If the authorities ask questions, you simply point to the parish ledger. "Look, sir, we raised 2 pence and a potato for the needy," very virtuous. It's not just the townsfolk, nobles are experts at this game. Caught with a mysterious troupe of jugglers and musicians after hours? Private cultural symposium. Found gambling with the mayor? Strategic planning for the upcoming morality play. The higher the status, the grander the loophole. If all else fails, someone invokes tradition, which, in medieval law, is just another word for nobody wants to argue about this anymore. But the best loophole of all? Blame the children. If questioned, everyone is just helping with the youth performance. And the worst that happens is a stern lecture about keeping the noise down and inviting the priest to the next rehearsal. Sometimes, the priest even brings a tambourine. So as you doze off, picture the medieval world not as a place of stern, unwavering rules, but as an endless parade of creative solutions, sly winks, and hastily written scripts. Because no matter how many laws are passed, the people always find a way to dance, laugh, and gather, if only under the noble banner of theatrical rehearsal. Curtain up, loophole in hand, and everyone gets a standing ovation just as soon as the beadle leaves. So tonight, as you drift off, tucked under your modern duvet with your thermostat set just right and your phone set to do not disturb, spare a moment for our medieval friends who braved public shame, moral patrols, and paperwork that required more wax seals than actual sense. Remember, every laugh you had tonight was bought with centuries of human stubbornness, creativity, and a refusal to follow rules that made zero sense even back then. Those strict laws, awkward punishments, and morality parades, they were all just people trying to keep society together, usually with a little hypocrisy, a lot of anxiety, and a heavy dash of do as I say, not as I do. It's easy to forget that behind every ridiculous rule, every outrageous fine, and every midnight raid by the town watch, there were real people hoping to find comfort, connection, and maybe just a little fun on a cold medieval night. They survived on wit, humor, and the world's most impressive collection of excuses for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, as you close your eyes, be grateful for the gentle, boring safety of the present, privacy, freedom, and not a single neighbor banging on your door with a list of infractions and a bucket of holy water. Maybe whisper a quiet thanks to your ancestors for surviving public stocks, gossip-fueled trials, and sumptuary inspectors who counted every feather on your hat. Because history, even when it's absurd and a little uncomfortable, reminds us how far we've come, and how much better life is when your after-dark hobbies don't require a legal defense or a bribe to the town crier. Sleep well, dream peacefully. And tomorrow, if anyone questions your pajama choices, just tell them you're rehearsing for a play. Good night.